Welcome to Kindred Spirits Book Club, the podcast where two grown-ass ladies geek out about Anne of Green Gables. I'm Reagan Duffy, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Kelly Gerner.
Hey there, Kindred Spirits. Reagan, I love Rainbow Valley, and I'm so excited we get to start talking about it today.
Me too. I definitely enjoyed this reread. There is so much I cannot wait to get into with you. But I do want to ask you before we get started, Kelly, have you recovered from our epic shopping day this weekend?
I have recovered. I have recovered. Listeners, so for Reagan's daughter Alice's birthday, I took her on a little shopping spree, and she's really becoming quite the fashionista, isn't she, Reagan?
Yes, it was really fun. She allowed me to come for part of it. So mostly because I was her wheels. So I drove her up to the mall and I hung out for like the first couple of stores and through lunch. And then Alice and Kelly took off to do the rest of the shopping. She's definitely getting a more defined sense of style.
Yes.
Right? Like she's really picking out things and being thoughtful about how things fit together. It was really fun.
It was really fun. And it was really interesting to sort of see how she is sort of defining herself through her fashion right now, knowing that that is an evolving thing as we get older and, never really stops. Really fun to see that with her. And I definitely think like some shades of Anne Shirley as well. Alice definitely likes a fun sleeve. She definitely likes some bows and little frills and flounces here and there. She has a very feminine sense of style. I don't know. We just had a ton of fun.
She even told me that evening, if Anne Shirley was modern, I would love going to places like Hot Topic and Claire's with her and finding what kind of jewelry she would like. She would love it.
Oh my gosh, that is so cute that Alice said that. Oh.
I know. And she loved just getting to spend that one-on-one time with you. It made her feel very special and grown up, and that your friendship has continued to grow up with her, and that you continued to develop a relationship with her as she becomes even more herself. I think that's such a lovely and special thing.
I really love it. With Alice particularly, I am starting to see glimpses of the kind of adult I think she will likely turn out to be, but that is very much an unwritten chapter of a half-finished book. And I kind of feel like I have front row seats for an amazing show. Well, I'm going to start to segue us to our episode and say we have a very fun example in Miss Cornelia of one such an adult who connects with a young child.
Well, let's get into it. But first, Kindred Spirits, did you know that we are on Instagram, and are you following us? We have a lot of fun sharing pictures and videos about books and Ella Montgomery and discussing them with you in the comments. So look us up there. We are kindredspirits.bookclub. You can also send us an email at kindredspirits.bookclub@gmail.com or shoot us a DM on Instagram. We always want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And Kindred Spirits, we have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, if that's where you listen. Spotify and Pocket Casts also now have the ability to rate podcasts. So if you listen there, please rate us 5 stars as well. This really helps us be more likely to get promoted on those sites so other Kindred Spirits can find us. But now, on to the episode. In today's episode, we are beginning our discussion of Rainbow Valley with a recap.
Our kindred spirit of the episode is Mary Vance. Mary is the lovable orphan girl of Rainbow Valley. A bit of a throwback to Anne's childhood, of course, although Anne and Mary have pretty starkly different personalities. As the book begins, Mary is a little spitfire of a neglected girl, proud and prone to flying off the handle, but adventurous and energetic, an exciting friend for the Meredith and Blythe children. Mary is bossy and a bit of a know-it-all, but underneath it lies a caring and loyal friend who is genuinely trying to look out for everyone, particularly the Meredith kids. Mary is ultimately taken in by Miss Cornelia, who gives her some structure, purpose, kindness, and love. And Mary flourishes under her care, becoming every bit the Glen St. Mary insider that her foster mother is.
Yeah, Mary really earns her spot as this week's kindred spirit. She makes things happen. She's an excellent contrast to the Meredith kids and the Blythes. And she's just a force, isn't she?
She really is. Mary's a lot of fun. For our quote of the episode, we simply adore this description of Rainbow Valley. To sit in Rainbow Valley, steeped in a twilight half gold, half amethyst, rife with the odors of balsam fir and woodsy grown things in their springtime prime, with the pale stars of wild strawberry blossoms all around you, and with the sigh of the wind and tinkle of bells in the shaking treetops, and eat fried trout and dry bread, was something which the mighty of earth might have envied them.
So let's get into Story Club. And today we are going to recap Rainbow Valley. Rainbow Valley is the 7th book in the Anne of Green Gables series. It was published in 1919, and in the original publishing order of the books, it came right after Anne's House of Dreams, which was published in 1917. So she was writing Rainbow Valley during and immediately after World War I. Even though we just read Anne of Ingleside, it's kind of funny because any of the events in Anne of Ingleside haven't actually been written yet in Rainbow Valley. So that might be part of the reason Anne of Ingleside just feels kind of inconsequential in the arc of the series. So Rainbow Valley picks up about 13 years after House of Dreams ends and just after Anne of Ingleside ends. It focuses much more on Anne's children, but even more so on the new neighbor children, the Merediths, over the course of a little more than a year. Anne is a background character for the book, as we instead take the Meredith children as our primary point of view characters. So let's review Anne's kids as we start this book. We have Jem, or James Matthew, age 13. He's reliable, steady, and popular, and he's starting to outgrow childhood escapades. Walter is 12. He's quieter and prefers to read rather than play roughly with the other boys. He has a poet's nature and imagination. The twins are Nan and Di, and they are 10. Nan has brown hair and a vivid imagination. Di has red hair like Anne and a more practical nature, but she is especially close to Walter. Shirley, forgotten Shirley, is about 8, and he is the little brown boy, quiet, Susan's favorite because she took care of him as a newborn as Anne was so gravely sick after his birth. Susan considers him hers, and we will not hear much about Shirley ever. This opening chapter is literally the only mention of him in the book. Justice for Shirley.
Justice for Shirley.
And then there's Rilla, who is the baby of the family at age 6. Red hair and a little spoiled and petted for being the last child.
Rilla literally gets a whole chapter in this book and in Ingleside, and Shirley is like not in any of these books.
No.
What is the point? Why did you even write him?
I don't know. I actually am very curious about this, and maybe we'll come across an Ella Montgomery scholar who has some thoughts about this. If this is you, please call us.
I know we need to send it the bat signal.
Because I am very curious. Why write Shirley at all?
Why?
Except as a character arc for Susan?
Kind of. Why does Anne have to give Susan a baby? Why is that important?
I don't know. All right, but let's get started. We open the book with Anne and Susan on the front porch, anticipating a visit from Miss Cornelia, or Mrs. Marshall Elliott, as Susan stubbornly refers to her. It's May, and Anne has just returned from the promised European trip. In her and Gilbert's absence, most of the children had gone to Avonlea for 3 months, and Shirley had gone with Susan to her family's home so she could have him all to herself for that time period.
Truly, so many questions. Okay, so question 1. Who is taking care of 5 children at Green Gables? We know that at this point in time, Mrs. Lynde and Marilla are like pretty elderly. I mean, you have to be in their 80s at least. And Davy is a busy farmer. So is the care and keeping of all of Anne's children falling to Davy's wife? Is Dora still around? My other question is, so Shirley and Susan just do something totally different? And that's fine? Like, why is Shirley not even a member of this family?
I know. So many questions. Okay, here's another question I have. This is also weird Shirley-Susan thing. In this opening scene, Shirley is asleep in Susan's lap, and then she carries him off to bed as Miss Cornelia arrives. Shirley is 8. Like,
stop.
I don't know if it's been a bit since Maud had held an 8-year-old when she wrote this book, but 8 is pretty tall and gangly and well past the time of falling asleep in someone's arms.
Yes, I have an 8-year-old nephew, and he is an absolute love and a cuddle bug, but I cannot imagine him falling asleep while being held still. Maud didn't even bother to flesh Shirley out, so like in her mind, he's just like small boy.
Yeah,
She hasn't thought about his like corporeal space in the world.
No, he could be anywhere between like age 2 and age 8. He's such a nut.
Totally. Oh man.
But in any case, everyone is home and reunited once more. Miss Cornelia fills them all in on the latest gossip. Most importantly, that the town has finally settled on a new Presbyterian minister, a Reverend John Meredith. He is a widower with 4 children and an excellent preacher, but he's very absent-minded and more focused on theology than parenting. A 75-year-old Aunt Martha looks after the house and kids. She's half blind, half deaf, very cranky, and Mr. Meredith took her in to save her from the poorhouse as she had been devoted to his wife. Aunt Martha is a terrible housekeeper and cook, so the children pretty much look after themselves. And those kids are Jerry, age 12. He's very clever. Spunky and heedless Faith, who is 11. Quiet, sweet Una, age 10, and Carl, age 9, who is passionate about animals. He's always collecting bugs and frogs. We also get some other downloads about what's what in Glen St. Mary's, including seeding some interest in Rosemary West and her sister Ellen West, setting up the info that Rosemary's fiance drowned at sea when they were only 17, and since then, the sisters have lived together. And then we switch to the children down in what they call Rainbow Valley. This is a valley behind the maple grove at the end of the Ingleside property, near the Glen St. Mary pond, and so named because they once saw a rainbow that seemed to end right in the valley. The 4 older Blythe children practically live there in their free time, and on this first evening back from Avonlea, they are reacquainting themselves with their favorite place. They've caught some trout, and Jem is frying it up over a little fire. And just as the Blythe kids are about to chow down, the Meredith kids come into the valley. The Meredith kids had been playing in the old graveyard behind the manse when they smelled the frying trout and decided to investigate. Aunt Martha is such a terrible cook that the Merediths are always a little hungry. She basically cooks up a big side of mutton at the beginning of the week and then serves up slabs of it cold for every meal for the rest of the week. Faith has dubbed it ditto since it's repeated over and over again. The Blythes immediately invite the Merediths to join them in their little impromptu feast. Quote, when the last trout had vanished, the manse children and the Ingleside children were sworn friends and allies. They had always known each other and always would. The race of Joseph recognized its own.
Now that the Blythes and Merediths are firm friends, we introduce another new character, Mary Vance. So the Merediths are exploring a neighboring field, and in a sort of out-of-the-way barn, they hear rustling in a hayloft and discover a young girl asleep in the hay. She's very blonde, with eyes so blue they are almost white, and she's dressed in desperately outgrown clothes, and we think she's about 12 years old. She bursts into tears at the sight of the Merediths and confesses that she hasn't eaten anything in 2 days. The Meredith children are horrified, and they bring her home, knowing that Aunt Martha won't even notice. And that their dad is also so up in his head he won't be aware of Mary either, should he even bother to come out of his study. Once Mary has eaten, though, we start to see her personality. She's talkative and scrappy, a little pugnacious. She likes to be a sensation and be the person who's in the know. She has a story that's a lot like Anne's origin story. She even comes from the same orphanage in Hopetown that Anne did. She's an orphan whose parents both died by suicide due to alcoholism when she was 6.
Better.
She lives with a Mrs. Wiley over harbor. Mrs. Wiley works Mary mercilessly, beats her often, and barely feeds her. Mary ran away because she heard that Mrs. Wiley was going to move away and give Mary to her cousin, who was even worse. Yikes. The Merediths are moved by Mary's story and entranced by the details in the exciting tales from her life. They want to protect her so she doesn't have to go back to Mrs. Wiley. They lend her some clothes and decide that she should sleep in their attic and count on Aunt Martha's failing eyesight and their father's abstraction to keep Mary in their home. Mary, she wants to earn her keep, so she starts cleaning up the manse and doing the housework while the other kids are at school, so the house even looks a little nicer, although Aunt Martha won't let Mary cook. The Merediths take Mary to church and to meet the Blythes, and everyone just assumes she's a visitor to the manse. No one questions it at all. Now, Mary's manners leave something to be desired. She's full of blunt opinions, she's bossy, and she's jealous of sharing Faith and Una with the Blythe girls. But she's an exciting friend, a hard worker, and she calls out explicitly the passive neglect by Reverend Meredith toward his children. Mary keeps waiting for Mrs. Wiley to hunt her down, but 2 weeks in, there's not a peep from her.
So our next little escapade involves little Rilla's encounter with Mary Vance, or Rilla. Rilla has been dressed in her finest clothes and sent by Susan to bring a basket of strawberries to Mr. Meredith. Mary Vance sees Rilla coming up to the gate, and the combo of the self-satisfied little strut and prissy clothes bugs Mary before Rilla even opens her mouth. Rilla had been charged to only give the basket to Mr. Meredith or Aunt Martha, and when she won't yield it to Mary, Mary starts teasing and mocking Rilla. All of a sudden, Mary catches a glimpse of some large codfish drying on a rack in the yard, and she's inspired to grab the largest, nearly as large as herself, and then chases poor Rilla with this extremely weird weapon. The strawberries go flying, and Mary chases Rilla all the way down the street, cackling all the way. Folks coming to the windows and gates to see what is happening. Just as Rilla reaches the corner store, she falls and lands splat in a mud puddle right at Miss Cornelia's feet. Mary susses out the change in situation in a flash and takes off. Miss Cornelia takes poor sobbing Rilla home. Susan is outraged. Anne is secretly a little amused because she knows Rilla is pretty vain. I don't think she deserved to get chased by a codfish, though.
It's just such a funny image. There's quite a lot of them. This is a funny book.
Yeah. And Miss Cornelia is now on the case of Mary Vance. And Miss Cornelia has lots of over harbor connections, thanks to her husband, Mr. Marshall Elliott. And she knows that Mary doesn't seem to belong to anyone from over harbor. Not only that, she's noticed that Mary is wearing Faith's dresses in church.
I love Miss Cornelia in this book so very much because of exactly this. Although there are plenty of people in the Glen, Susan among them, who think that Miss Cornelia is a hopeless busybody, I see her as someone who notices. She notices the people in her community, she's paying attention, and she can tell when someone is being harmed or neglected or overlooked. She certainly doesn't mind her own business, but she also won't let anyone fall through the cracks.
She seems to be the only one to notice or care that the situation with Mary is a little strange and doesn't add up. Love that she just jumps into action.
Yep.
So Miss Cornelia and Anne are also noticing the state of the Meredith kids. And while they think that the Merediths are all, quote, brave and frank and loyal and truthful, they are running wild without any supervision. And they are guessing that Aunt Martha doesn't pay any attention to feeding them, and nor does their father ever really notice. They speculate on who Mr. Meredith could possibly marry, so as to give the kids a stepmother.
So we're going to spend a lot of time on this in a future episode, but we'll just flag it here because it's an important discussion point for this book. We don't believe the responsibility of raising the Meredith children falls to anyone except for Reverend Meredith.
Yeah, the bar is kind of low. He doesn't have to be Father of the Year here to actually notice his kids and check on how they're doing.
Yeah, or like notice that there's like a random fifth child in his house.
So Miss Cornelia takes herself to the manse and demands some answers from Mary. Mary's upfront and honest, and Miss Cornelia is even a little impressed by her. Mary owns that the codfish thing was mean, and she confesses that she cried about it afterwards. Miss Cornelia has heard rumors that Mrs. Wiley had a, quote, home child, that she was working too hard. So she's going to look into it and hopes that Mary doesn't have to go back to the orphanage. And 2 days later, Miss Cornelia reports back that apparently Mrs. Wiley was found dead in her bed the very morning after Mary ran away. Some neighbors found her, but supposed that Mrs. Wiley had already sent Mary to her cousin's house. And since that cousin didn't come to the funeral, nobody knew any differently. So Miss Cornelia's husband, Kelly's favorite, Marshall Elliott,
I love him.
Marshall is furious to hear how Mary was abused by Mrs. Wiley, per his over harbor relatives.
See, Marshall is just like his wife. He cares about the whole community. I love them both.
I think when you think about Marshall Elliott, you're kind of thinking about your husband, Chuck.
I really am.
So Nan has overheard this whole discussion and takes herself off to Rainbow Valley to report on it. There, the other kids are hanging out and chatting, and Walter shares almost a premonition saying, quote, someday the Pied Piper will come over the hill up there and down Rainbow Valley, piping merrily and sweetly, and I will follow him down to the shore, down to the sea, away from you all. I don't think I'll want to go. Jem will want to go. It will be such an adventure, but I won't. Only I'll have to. The music will call and call and call me until I must follow. Di cries, they'll all go. And Walter responds, no, you'll sit here and wait, said Walter, his great splendid eyes full of a strange glamour. You'll wait for us to come back, and we may not come, for we cannot come as long as the piper plays. He may pipe us round the world, and still you'll sit here and wait and wait. Ooh. Yeah, this is a weird, eerie little interlude, and they all shiver with it. The kids shake it off, and into this moment, Nan arrives with the news that she has just overheard. Mary immediately worries that she has caused Mrs. Wiley's death because she prayed that she wouldn't have to go back to her. Miss Cornelia goes to Mr. Meredith and tells him all about the situation and takes him to task for not noticing a fifth child living in his home. Mr. Meredith! So they decide that Mary should stay at the manse a little longer, on purpose this time, while they write to the orphanage in Hopetown and find out what is to be done. Mr. Meredith wakes up enough with this to actually notice Mary, and he spends some time talking with her individually. He reassures her that she didn't cause Mrs. Wiley's death. Mary reports afterwards to Una, "Your father's all right when he does wake up," she said with a sniff that just escaped being a sob. "It's a pity he doesn't wake up oftener." Mary's very worried about what will happen if she goes back to the orphan asylum. And Nan comes up with the excellent idea that maybe Miss Cornelia could take Mary. Una, despite being very in awe of Miss Cornelia, takes it upon herself to go ask on behalf of Mary. It takes a lot of courage for Una, but she does. And she's so worried about Mary that Miss Cornelia considers it. Marshall is all for it, so Miss Cornelia agrees. Anne is delighted and says that she was once just like Mary. Miss Cornelia thinks that Mary is probably very different than Anne was, but, quote, "She's also a human being with an immortal soul to save. I've got a shorter catechism and a small tooth comb, and I'm going to do my duty by her now that I've set my hand to the plow, believe me." Much like Marilla, Miss Cornelia can't turn away from what she perceives is her duty. Mary's pretty satisfied with going to live with Miss Cornelia, but on her last night in the manse, she manages to instill a new fear in Una, who is sleeping with her in the attic. A fear of stepmothers. Mary says she knows that people will start pressuring Mr. Meredith to remarry, and stepmothers always turn fathers against their children. Una gets very upset about this, and Mary is a little sorry. She said she only wanted to prepare her, not frighten her. Coincidentally, we see that this very night, Mr. Meredith, finally going to bed at dawn after staying up all night reading about a saint, notices that Una isn't in her bed and realizes he should probably know where his daughter is.
You think?
He reflects that he misses his wife deeply, and he doesn't think he'll ever marry again. He knows he should think more about his daughters, but his mind drifts back to the saints again, and that's the last he considers it. That's Mr. Meredith to a T. Well, the next escapade involves Faith and Una getting themselves to Sunday school on a very rainy Sunday on their own. Their father and Jerry aren't home, having gone to Nova Scotia for Mr. Meredith's short vacation.
So while Mr. Meredith and Jerry are out, as it happens, Aunt Martha is also laid up with some unknown ailment, and Carl is in bed with a sore throat. So it's just the girls, Faith and Una, who are doing their best to cook for themselves. They're pretty terrible at it, and Una desperately wishes they had someone to teach them. But they manage to get themselves off to Sunday school. Weirdly, though, no one else comes. They blame this on the fact that it's raining. Una despairs about the state of the house, worse than ever since Mary left, because not only is Aunt Martha a terrible housekeeper, she won't let the girls help at all either. Faith gets the inspired idea that the next day they will do a thorough deep cleaning on their own because Aunt Martha won't interfere, and they will have the whole house looking sparkling clean before their father gets back. The girls carry out this plan the next day. They drag all the furniture outside and set to work. Now, Faith doesn't actually know how to wash the windows without streaks, and she accidentally breaks a pane, and she shakes the rugs out in the graveyard while Una dusts and sweeps inside. They notice that when the Clow family drives past as they're cleaning, that the Clow girls don't wave to them as they usually would, but Faith and Una are satisfied with their efforts, and because it rains for the next several days and the Blythes are away in Avonlea, they don't get a chance to see anyone outside of their house. In the meantime, the Glen St. Mary community writ large is aghast that the Meredith girls stayed home from Sunday school and cleaned house, shaking rugs in a graveyard no less. The scandal spreads and becomes all the more scandalous in the spreading. By the time all the kids reconvene in Rainbow Valley, Mary Vance has heard the scandal and she comes to chastise Faith and Una. The girls are bewildered. They swear they cleaned house on Monday. They went to Sunday school the day before, remember, and no one else came. Now it comes out that they had their days mixed up because the Thursday prayer meeting was moved to Wednesday that particular week. It was a whole thing. So the rainy day was actually Saturday, not Sunday, as Faith and Una had thought. Now, Faith thinks this is all a tremendous joke, and she says, it's fine, we'll just explain. And honestly, I think Faith is probably right here.
Right. She's just thinking this is an honest mistake, nothing malicious.
But Una is more troubled, especially because Mary says that people won't believe it was a mistake and that they have disgraced their father. Una is very worried by all of this, but Faith has a plan. Dr. Cooper is preaching at the church while Mr. Meredith is on vacation. And so, at the end of his sermon, Faith marches up to the pulpit and addresses the whole congregation. Now, Faith is wearing an old faded dress, somewhat inexpertly darned with a bright red thread, so she looks a little shabby. At first she freezes, but then Jem's pal Bertie Shakespeare Drew makes a face at her, so she responds by making a terrible face right back at him, which has the benefit of chasing the stage fright away. Faith clearly explains the mix-up about cleaning on Sunday afternoon to the congregation, although it does cause a bit of a sensation when she said that the reason they wanted to clean house was to, quote, stop old cats from talking about how dirty the manse was. Faith concludes, "It isn't right for any of you to blame my father for this because he was away and didn't know. And anyhow, we thought it was Monday. He's just the best father that ever lived in the world, and we love him with all our hearts." She runs out of church sobbing, and everyone is a little stunned. Reactions, as you can imagine, are pretty mixed to Faith's speech. People like Anne and Rosemary West think that she's brave. Some folks think it's all a good joke and it livened up the service. And some folks, like Miss Cornelia, are ashamed, and they thought that it cast their congregation and their minister in a poorer light. And honestly, I kind of agree with Miss Cornelia. Not that Faith herself is a poor representative of Reverend Meredith or of the congregation. I think that Faith did do something brave in this moment. But I think what Miss Cornelia is seeing through is that Reverend Meredith isn't present enough in his children's lives to prevent this kind of mishap in the first place. That does reflect on him and the congregation.
Yes, I totally agree with that. But also in this case, kind of no. I mean, Mr. Meredith is definitely neglectful. And in this situation, his neglect has been more about ceding all responsibility to Aunt Martha, who is not up for the job. But he isn't specifically responsible for this particular situation. He left his kids with a somewhat competent adult or what he thinks is a competent adult and didn't know she would get laid up with an illness in bed. But I do think the problem is that the rest of the village has noticed his neglect overall, and this is just a particular proof of it.
Faith doesn't let folks' memories soften at all before. Sorry.
You can't even read it, can you?
Okay. Everyone, truly, this book is such a riot. So after this whole dazzling moment in church, Faith doesn't even let folks' memories soften at all before she dares Walter Blythe to ride pigs with her through town. Why? Unclear, but ride pigs they do. Walter, who has sort of some sense of propriety, was quite red with shame, but Faith was laughing her head off. They zipped right by Mr. Meredith as he was walking home from the train station. In this moment, Mr. Meredith was actually in the world enough to notice because he had just talked to Miss Cornelia, who brought him down to earth for a minute. He vows to talk to Faith about this unseemly behavior, but forgets, of course, by the time he gets home. Absolutely infuriating.
I am not sure how you forget that your daughter rode a pig through town. That's really memorable. Well, our next chapter shifts viewpoints to the adults. John Meredith and Rosemary West run into each other as they cross Rainbow Valley by the little spring. When she was just 17 years old, Rosemary's beau, Martin, had proposed to her there, and they had promised a life to each other. But soon after that, he was lost at sea. Rosemary comes to the spring to remember him and their romance. And one evening, John Meredith is there, taking a moment to drink in the beauty of Rainbow Valley. When he sees Rosemary, all of a sudden he notices her in a way he never did at church, and he thinks that she is the most beautiful woman, even if she looks nothing like his wife. John fashions a cup out of birch bark and shares a drink of water with Rosemary. There's something in that moment that they both recognize, and John walks her home. Both of them had thought that their time for romantic love had passed. But all of a sudden, it seems like it could be woken up again. The two chat easily as they walk, and they arrive home to find Rosemary's sister, Ellen West. Ellen is an intelligent, formidable woman, and she clearly catches the vibe between Rosemary and John, but she says nothing at the moment, instead getting John into a discussion of world politics that foreshadow the troubles in Europe preceding World War I. When he leaves, Ellen calls out this vibe to Rosemary, who denies it. Ellen reminds her of a promise between them. And for the first time, Rosemary feels irritated by this reminder, though it's one that Ellen makes every time Rosemary has any conversation with any man. As John walks home, we see that at first he's thinking about Rosemary, but then he gets distracted by a point Ellen made about German theology. And then he's gone. He's stuck in his head about those ideas. He spends the next week thoroughly immersed in this train of thought and research, forgetting to eat unless Una forces him, missing messages, marrying a young couple who come to the manse while he's still in carpet slippers. And he accidentally starts with the funeral service instead.
I can't even with any of this. He's so easily distracted that he can't focus on his children, on his love life, on his job. Like, I'm just so sorry for everyone in John Meredith's orbit. Reagan, I think in a future episode, I'm going to need you to put on your therapist's hat and talk about whether or not we think there might be, like, I don't know, some kind of underlying mental health issue with him. Like, what is his deal?
I think it's called the patriarchy, Kelly.
Oh, man.
Well, on Saturday afternoon, Mr. Meredith has to wake up, though, because he receives a call from Mrs. Alec Davis, the wealthiest woman in his congregation, who contributes quite a lot to his salary. Mrs. Davis is appalled by the state of the manse. There's no curtains because the kids use them to play. Everything is crooked and dusty and dirty. Jerry and Carl are sliding down the banisters. Faith's beloved pet rooster, named Adam, is wandering the halls. Mrs. Davis has come to inform Mr. Meredith of a decision that she has made. She tells him point blank she has decided to adopt Una. She had been thinking of adopting a child since her husband died, but it's so hard to find a suitable one. Quote, a quiet, obedient girl that I could train up to be a lady. Una will suit me exactly. Mrs. Davis says that obviously this is a great chance for Una. She will be well dressed and educated. She can have music and painting lessons if she wants, and Mrs. Davis will leave her all her money when she dies. She says, I thought you'd only be too glad to let me have her. Nobody ever supposed you cared anything about your children. You neglect them scandalously. It's the talk of the place. They aren't fed and dressed properly, and they're not trained at all. You never think of doing your duty as a father. And she makes some other choice observations, which, while rude, are also true.
It seems like a wild and out-of-pocket thing for Mrs. Alec Davis to come and be like, hey, can I have your kid? On the other hand, is she wrong?
That's the thing. And
Yeah.
of course, Mr. Meredith refuses. He remembers how, as his wife was dying, she begged him to protect Una, worried that the world would be so hard on Una's sweetness. Mrs. Davis storms out, but she does leave Mr. Meredith disturbed. She woke him up, at least. He wonders over the truth of her statements. He knows he loves his kids and that they love him, but he also knows his immense limitations in parenting them. He can't get a housekeeper because it would hurt Aunt Martha, who had been devoted to his wife. He feels that maybe he should marry again. Maybe that would help his family and children. So wait, he cares so much about Aunt Martha's feelings, he can't get a housekeeper to properly take care of his children, so he'll get married instead?
I mean, the logic.
Like, those are your kids. Have the hard conversation, man, with Aunt Martha. Well, Mr. Meredith thinks maybe he should go talk to Mrs. Blythe about this. But as he's leaving the manse, he passes her leaving Ingleside with Gilbert. So instead, he decides to go see Rosemary and Ellen West, thinking up kind of a flimsy excuse to go.
Okay, John. Well, so this is just another theme that we're going to flag for a future discussion. We spoke a lot in our Ingleside episodes about Anne trying to find her place in the community and her identity outside of being a wife and mother. And something that begins to emerge in Rainbow Valley and ends up really solidifying in Rilla of Ingleside is that Anne sort of finds herself in this role of like a community wise woman to whom many people go with their conundrums.
So Mary, who is now at Miss Cornelia's side, is privy to all the hottest gossip, and she takes to Rainbow Valley the news that Mrs. Alec Davis has left the church and she won't pay any more to Mr. Meredith's salary.
Yikes.
She has heard all of the adults worrying that not only had they lost her money, but that she might turn the rest of the Douglas clan against Mr. Meredith, in which case he won't be able to stay as minister. The adults also mention that Norman Douglas used to pay a great deal every year, but left the church some years ago over some deal regarding a cow gone wrong. Norman Douglas had been a beau of Ellen West, but they had a quarrel and broke it off, and he married another woman to spite Ellen, a woman who was far too meek and who has since died. Mary relays all of this to Faith. Faith feels terrible, and she desperately does not want to leave Glen St. Mary. Faith decides that she has to make this right, and so she is going to go see Norman Douglas and ask him to come back to the church.
I love how brave these kids are.
They really are.
So the next day, Faith goes off to see Norman Douglas, walking a little of the way with Walter, who is struggling with a terrible toothache. He's too afraid to go to the dentist to get the tooth pulled. He's afraid of the pain. Faith scoffs at this and points out that it would be over sooner rather than suffering on and off again with this toothache. Walter's afraid of the blood. He says he can't bear to see anyone hurt, and he wants to run away from anything like that. Faith shares that seeing people hurt doesn't make her want to run, it makes her want to go to work and help. And that's all beautiful foreshadowing for World War I and important character development for both of these kids. On their way, they pass a classmate named Dan Reese. He's sort of like the town bully, and he taunts Faith as a pig girl due to the pig riding incident. He does not seem to call Walter a pig boy. Unfair. Faith ignores him, but wishes that she had been with Jem, who she knows would have fought Dan to make him sorry for insulting Faith. She doesn't expect Walter to. She knows it's not his nature. Walter is very conscious of this, but he simply can't bring himself to fight. It's too rough and painful and ugly. The kids go their separate ways on their separate errands. Faith starts to lose her nerve a little. She heard that Norman Douglas called people nasty names, which bothers her far more than physical injuries. Even the older boys at school were afraid of him. She finally comes to his house, where he's sitting out on his front porch, and already in a bad mood because he had had a quarrel with his housekeeper. Maud tells us, quote, Norman Douglas liked girls of spirit and flame and laughter. And right at this moment, Faith is pale and trembling, already looking afraid. And, quote, the bully in Norman Douglas's heart stirred. He demands in his deep voice that she state her name and her reason for coming. Faith freezes and he yells at her, asking her what's wrong with her and why she won't speak up. Maud tells us he's yelling so loudly his voice could have been heard at the harbor. Faith finally stammers out that she came to ask him to rejoin the church, and he yells that someone must have put her up to it. She tries to stand up for herself, and Norman yells, now get out, cheese face, at Faith. And she turns and runs out to the lane.
First, cheese face?
Cheese
Second,
face?
Is that an insult?
Unknown.
And then second, this dude, he's yelling at a 12-year-old kid. Horrible.
Horrible. Norman is a really fascinating character for me in this book, and somehow a very unlikely romantic hero. There's a part of me that does like him. I like that he's brash and forthright. I like that he likes a challenging woman like Ellen. But this part of him, which is so easily triggered by a child, I mean, how could he ever really come across as being the charming character he might be otherwise when he's calling poor little girls cheese face?
An adult man whose bully's heart is sparked by a scared 12-year-old? Yeah. In modern day, you know this guy would have been an internet troll.
Totally.
I am not a Norman Douglas fan. Perhaps you were blinded by your love for the big burly guys.
I am. I'm always willing to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Kelly's got a type.
Oh my God, Reagan. Well, I'm not into any man who has a bully's heart. Okay. So I'll just say.
That's true. No. You like the big guys that look a little intimidating, but heart of gold.
Exactly right. This sort of teddy bear cinnamon roll guy.
Yeah.
Actually, if they are a teddy bear and a cinnamon roll at the same time, so much the better. Well, Faith gets to the end of the lane and her panic turns to anger, and Norman Douglas's insult burns her soul. She turns around and she stalks back, walks right into the kitchen where Norman had just sat down, yanks his newspaper out of his hand and dresses him down, her eyes flashing and her cheeks flaming. I have come back to tell you exactly what I think of you, said Faith in clear, ringing tones. I am not afraid of you. You are a rude, unjust, tyrannical, disagreeable old man. Susan says you are sure to go to hell, and I was sorry for you, but I am not now. Your wife never had a new hat for 10 years. No wonder she died. I am going to make faces at you whenever I see you after this. Every time I am behind you, you will know what is happening. Father has a picture of the devil in a book in his study, and I mean to go home and write your name under it. You are an old vampire, and I hope you'll have the Scotch fiddle.
Well done, girl.
Maud lets us in on the knowledge that Faith did not know what a vampire or a Scotch fiddle was. And if you at home are wondering what Scotch fiddle might be, it is slang for an itch, but most specifically, it could refer to scabies. So, not very nice. Norman Douglas is taken aback, but then bursts out laughing. He's tickled by Faith's outburst and invites her to sit down. He apologizes, and at first Faith won't shake hands with him, but he promises that if she'll shake hands and break bread with him, he'll pay what he used to in salary for Mr. Meredith and go to church the first Sunday of the month. What's more, he won't let Mrs. Alec Davis influence the rest of the Douglas clan. Faith agrees, and the bargain is struck. He avows that he doesn't mean anything by his temper, that it's better than sulking. Yeah, right. We also have to point out that there are various racist comments by Norman in this little spiel here. So if you are reading this book, you'll probably be taken aback by it. Namely, he tells Faith that she can't write his name under the picture of the devil because the devil is black and he is red. Now, I don't know if he's specifically referring to someone of African ancestry or just the color black, but as he also refers to the missionaries his wife preferred to give her money to as, quote, yellow fellows, reader beware with this. He's just a real mixed bag of a character.
Let's say that.
Norman plies Faith with jars of jam, lots of produce, and entreats her to take a kitten before driving her home. So Faith goes to bed a victor, although still slightly smarting about the fact that Dan Reese had called her a pig girl, knowing he'll likely do it again. But we like seeing Faith stand up to bullies like this.
As Faith suspected, at school, Dan Reese again taunts her as pig girl and throws in rooster girl as an extra insult. Walter overhears and he yells that Dan better stop. So Dan, knowing that Walter's a weak target, switches to taunting Walter as a coward and then ups the ante and yells that Walter's mother writes lies too. At this, Walter throws himself at Dan and lands one good blow. But the school bell rings, so the boys vow to meet again the next day to finish the fight. Walter dreads it all night. He cannot sleep. And Faith is secretly a little thrilled about it, thinking of Walter as a knight fighting for her honor, although she would have more confidence if it was Jem. The fight gathers a crowd of kids. Walter is disgusted about the idea of fighting, and Dan strikes the first blow. But the pain sparks something in him, and Walter throws himself at Dan in a fury. Walter has no clear memory of what happens, but suddenly he finds himself pinning Dan to the ground, Dan's nose spurting blood. He makes Dan take back all his insults and then lets him go. The spectators are somewhat frightened by Walter's fury. They had never seen that kind of singular focus before, certainly not from Walter. Walter is disgusted with himself. He takes off. Quote, he felt none of the victor's joy, but he felt a certain calm satisfaction in duty done and honor avenged, mingled with a sickish qualm when he thought of Dan's gory nose. It had been so ugly, and Walter hated ugliness. Walter meets Mr. Meredith in Rainbow Valley, who guesses from Walter's own injuries that he has been in a fight. Mr. Meredith assures Walter that his cause was just. He says, my motto, Walter, is don't fight till you're sure you ought to, and then put every ounce of you into it. Walter realizes he wasn't frightened anymore, that the dread is worse than the thing itself, and he decides he's going to ask his father to take him to the dentist to have his tooth out. The adults are all glad that Walter has had a fight. Anne is proud of him, and Susan hopes it cures him of his poetry.
I don't think it works like that, Susan, but I'm proud of Walter for standing up for what's right in this moment. The next chapter puts yet again Mary Vance as the one to convey some hard news to the Merediths. She had heard that Aunt Martha was butchering a rooster to have for dinner for the visiting minister, Mr. Perry. He and Mr. Meredith were swapping churches for the week, so he will be staying at the Merediths. Well, there's only one rooster that could be, Faith's beloved pet rooster, Adam.
Poor Faith. She speeds off to the manse where it is sadly true. Aunt Martha is unrepentant. She does not care at all about Faith's feelings. She had to have something for Mr. Perry's dinner. She was not going to serve him cold boiled mutton. And she tells Faith not to bother her father about it when he gets home either. So the kids have really internalized that whatever their father is thinking about when he's abstracted like that is far more important than anything about them ever.
Yeah.
They don't ask for anything, and they try not to worry him at all with their concerns because his intellectual and religious focus is so much more important. And I hate that. In any case, poor Faith is a mess. So she's very rude to Mr. Perry, who, after all, didn't know anything about the situation with the chicken. She has to sit there and watch as Mr. Perry carves up Adam for Sunday dinner.
Horrifying.
After dinner, she ends up in the study thinking to bury herself in a book for escape, only for Mr. Perry to come in and lecture Faith about how she should try to be a better housekeeper and how his daughter is already excellent. But then again, Faith hasn't had a mother's guidance and her father is neglecting his responsibility. And I think Mr. Perry, by responsibility, means that her father should marry again, although we do agree with Mr. Perry that Mr. Meredith is neglectful.
Yeah.
Faith is doing her best to tune this out, but she is delighted to realize that Mr. Perry is standing so close to the fireplace that his coattails are beginning to smoke. They don't burst into flame, but they do scorch, and a spark catches and burns a hole in one. Mr. Perry finally realizes this, and after he rectifies the situation, he asks if Faith saw that they were burning, and she owns that she did, but, quote, you said it wasn't good manners to interrupt.
It's a minor bit of revenge for Faith, but the next day things are even worse because Mary Vance told all about the Adams situation, and everyone but the Blythes thinks that this is a great joke. The kids at school are pretty terrible about it, giggling and sending Faith mock condolences. Faith decides that after school she's going to go up to Ingleside and pour her heart out to Anne because she knows that Anne won't laugh at her and that she will understand. And as Faith runs through Rainbow Valley on the way to Ingleside, she runs into Rosemary West, who is coming back from Ingleside herself, where she gives Nan and Di music lessons. A little peek into Rosemary's POV tells us that she might be having some pleasant thoughts because John Meredith rarely misses a Monday evening visiting at the West House these days. Rosemary clocks that Faith is upset. Faith declines to share, and Rosemary is very understanding. She says, "Oh, you mean nothing you can tell outsiders, don't you?" When Faith shares that she was going to talk to Mrs. Blythe, Rosemary tells her that Anne isn't home right now, and Rosemary invites Faith to confide in her, saying, "It is such a help to talk things over. I know. I don't suppose I can be as good at understanding as Mrs. Blythe, but I can promise you that I won't laugh." Faith doubts that she won't at least laugh inside, and Rosemary replies, "No, I wouldn't laugh inside either. Why should I? Something has hurt you. It never amuses me to see anybody hurt, no matter what hurts them. If you feel like you'd like to tell me what has hurt you, I'll be glad to listen. But if you think you'd rather not, that's all right too, dear." So Faith spills all and finds that Rosemary West is a good listener and is very sympathetic. Rosemary even shares that she had a pet hen when she was a little girl that she loved very much. When Faith declares that she won't love anything again, Rosemary is very wise and says, "We miss so much out of life if we don't love. The more we love, the richer life is, even if it is only some little furry or feathery pet." And I think she's starting to recognize that this is true for herself too. Rosemary offers Faith a pet canary, and Faith feels deeply understood and comforted. Rosemary and Faith talk for a long time, and Faith confides in her. It must feel good for Faith to finally have an adult she can lay her burdens down with. When Faith gets home, Mr. Meredith is distracted and his head is in the clouds as usual, but he does catch Faith saying Rosemary West's name as she is telling Una how lovely she was to her, even hugging Faith, who is so obviously deeply yearning for that kind of care. Mr. Meredith wakes up enough to ask Faith if she likes Miss West.
Yeah, he can wake up enough for that, huh?
Yeah.
In the next chapter, we see Mr. Meredith walking over to the West House yet again. It's winter by now. We see him realizing that he cares for Rosemary, not in the same way as for his wife Cecilia, which was a young and passionate kind of love, but still he cares for Rosemary deeply. And he's thinking about being a little practical. He knows his children need something that he seems incapable of giving them. At least he's vaguely aware of his limitations. He's just not working very hard to overcome them, in my opinion. He thinks, quote, "Rosemary was beautiful and sweet and dear, very dear. She was the best of companions. He was happier in her company than he had ever expected to be again. She would be an ideal mistress for his home, a good mother to his children." And we see that although most folks think that John Meredith is too abstracted to pick up on all these hints people have been dropping about how he should get married again, he is very aware of those hints, but he didn't want to get remarried just because it was sensible, practical. He has some romantic ideals still that he can't quite sweep away, but Rosemary West is different. He has built a friendship and a companionship with her over the last few months. His vague kind of courtship is being hampered by Ellen, though, who always manages to be present. And even though he likes Ellen a lot, she's fascinating and intelligent, and he can talk politics and world events with her. She's always there and on the lookout for anything romantic between John and Rosemary, nipping it right in the bud. However, tonight she will be away, and so he's on a mission. Ellen even suspects that while she's gone, John will take the opportunity to propose to Rosemary, but figures he may as well get it over with and have him rejected because she is still going to hold Rosemary to that promise. She knows it's ugly and possessive of her, but she's not going to let Rosemary go. And Rosemary also guesses that it is coming, and she thinks she will disappoint John, but knows that he's devoted to his previous wife, so she thinks he'll be okay. He'll get over it. She knows that she would be happy with John if she truly let herself care for him, but her promise stands between herself and this happiness. And it turns out that after Rosemary's fiance Martin had died at sea and Norman, Douglas, and Ellen had quarreled and broken off, Ellen went into a kind of deep depression, feeling like she would always be alone, particularly after their mother died. At the depths of it, Rosemary promised that Ellen would always have her. And Ellen harshly said that Rosemary will eventually fall in love again and she'll be all alone and she'd rather die. So Rosemary promised to never marry again. And since in that moment she was also grieving her love, it seemed an easy promise to make. Well, John Meredith does indeed propose, and Rosemary intends to say no forthrightly. She even had a little speech planned. But in the moment, she finds she can't say the words. So she stammers out that she'd like a few days to think about it. John is a little surprised, but of course he grants that.
It's one of these moments for Rosemary, I think, where she's surprised herself. It's almost like Rosemary learns more about how she feels about the proposal and this promise when she's actually in the moment than she ever could have predicted when she first made that promise. And I just wish that Rosemary had the strength to listen to her heart.
Ellen comes home, having had a lovely time at a silver wedding celebration, one in which she had run into Norman Douglas again and had a great deal of fun arguing with him. Ellen is realizing that she will miss her spirited conversations with John Meredith, sure that he won't visit again once Rosemary has rejected him, and feeling badly that there's no way that Norman will come to visit her either, so they can keep arguing. She's realizing that she's been hurting herself with this stubbornness.
Yeah, you think, Ellen?
But that doesn't stop her from holding Rosemary to her promise when Rosemary asks to be freed of it to marry John. Ellen is inflexible. They argue, but Ellen is not moved. She says she would go crazy if she lived alone. So if Rosemary leaves, she will be forsworn to Ellen forevermore. So Rosemary sends a note of rejection to John. She tries to be as firm and even cold as possible so that he won't suspect that she actually cares and try to plead with her.
This is all really tough. And clearly there is a lot happening in Ellen and Rosemary's relationship that's causing them both to cling to each other, even when they're beginning to realize that their happiness lies elsewhere.
In that moment of rejection, John realizes it's not that he just cares for Rosemary. He loves her deeply and he feels bereft. She seems lost to him. And so all of these adults retreat to their own silos of loneliness.
And the narrative swings back to the kids. Now it's spring. Mary Vance is over, and she starts lecturing the Merediths about their behavior, saying that people are talking badly about the kids again, and they might even ask their father to resign because the kids reflect so badly on the congregation. Things like frogs hopping out of Carl's pocket in Sunday school, a praying competition in the old graveyard that is blamed on the Merediths, even though it was Nan Blythe's idea. They blew bubbles on the tombstones and forgot that the Methodists are sensitive about kids playing there. Mary also drops the intel that Mr. Meredith has been going to see Rosemary West and talks about how stepmothers are awful and how she will be mean once she marries their father. Mary leaves, and the Meredith kids are quite upset. When Jem Blythe comes through Rainbow Valley later on, they talk to him about it. He suggests that they will have to find a way to bring themselves up since they have no one else to do it. And everyone just seems to tacitly agree that there's no use in their father being involved in this endeavor.
No, just count him out altogether.
So Jem suggests a good conduct club, that they punish themselves every time they do something wrong and they hold themselves accountable. He says that most of the time the problem is that they are impulsive and don't think before they act. So the club might help them think first, and punishing themselves would be more effective because they would choose relevant punishments for themselves. The Merediths are all in on this, and they decide that they will meet every night and talk over the day and decide together if anyone did something that would disgrace their father. They will have Jem as a judge if they can't agree, but they will keep it a secret from everyone else. Now, Una is still worried about the stepmother thing. Faith thinks there's no way someone like Rosemary West could ever be mean, but Una is truly convinced by Mary Vance's certainty that stepmothering changes people. You know, Mary is just one of those kids who really has a knack for speaking with authority, and she gets so much unwarranted buy-in from the other children because of it.
Absolutely. When Mary speaks, she's 100% convinced by it. And for a kid like Una, who doubts herself all the time, Mary Vance's certainty kind of feels like law.
Yeah.
Well, the Merediths begin their good conduct club, and it works great at first. They parent each other. They generally punish themselves by making themselves miss out on something fun. And for 2 weeks, they cause no scandals as they embark on this new project. Doesn't last forever, though. Their first scandal is when Faith gives her only pair of good stockings to a poorer girl from the harbor. Faith offers her stockings impulsively in the moment, right out of the goodness of her heart, quite forgetting that she has no other stockings without holes to wear to church, except a pair of hideously striped stockings of red and blue. So she goes to church bare-legged. The congregation is shocked. Susan immediately decides to knit Faith a new pair. Good eggs, Susan.
Yep.
The president of the Ladies' Aid wants the whole group to go to the minister to protest. Miss Cornelia despairs and is tired of making excuses for Mr. Meredith's neglect. Jerry decides that Faith needs to wear the striped stockings to school for a whole week as punishment. Faith is bothered by this, but also bothered that it is her father being blamed. He definitely did not notice what Faith was wearing on her legs. So she decides she's going to write an explanation to the newspaper. Faith's letter lands on the front page due to an assistant editor with a sense of humor and a little too much freedom. And her explanation of caring about a poor child without shoes and stockings throws a little shade at the Christian neighbors who spend more time sending clothes to heathen children through the missions than the poor in their own community. Faith also says a few other things that puncture the goodness of various other community members. She winds up by confessing to taking some potatoes from a local farmer's field and gets in one last shaming statement when she says she will pay him back when she gets older because she has no money because her father's salary isn't always paid up regularly. Anne is amused by this whole letter on the front page. Miss Cornelia despairing.
Yeah.
And the various members of the church who felt called out in Faith's letter are furious and planning to leave the church.
I love this episode. It's so silly. Faith's letter is amazing. Maud is very cleverly critiquing pious people who don't care for the poor in their own communities and who don't pay ministers well. Remember, of course, that Maud herself, a minister's wife, earned more for their family through her writing than her husband did as a minister.
Miss Cornelia is upset that John Meredith doesn't seem to visit Rosemary West anymore. There goes that stepmother idea. And maybe Ellen and Norman Douglas seem to be renewing an interest in each other.
Ellen. Just saying, there's a real easy path to happiness right here for all four of you.
Well, the next scandal is the Merediths having a concert in the graveyard. They sat on the tombstones and they sang mostly hymns, which was okay-ish. But they finished up with a rousing version of Polly Wolly Doodle sung at top volume. Worse, it was during the Methodist prayer meeting, so there were lots of witnesses.
It's so good.
Miss Cornelia brings this to their father's attention, and he at least remembers about it long enough to talk about it with them. And the kids are more ashamed of themselves because their father was disappointed in them, and so they vow to punish themselves hard for it. They decide the thing to do is to fast all day, and they pick Sunday because it's the one day they actually get something decent to eat. So it's really punishing them. They gamely try to stick with it all day, but Una, who is not well nourished to begin with, ends up fainting in church. And she's out cold. Gilbert is there. He helps her come to, which is admittedly kind of difficult, takes him longer than it should, and carries her home to the manse. Faith shares with Gilbert and Mr. Meredith that they were fasting. And with her knack of saying the hard things out loud, she said, "It's our rule in our good conduct club, you know. We're bringing ourselves up, you know, because there is nobody to do it." And this rightly disturbs their father, as it should, who acknowledges to himself that he's, quote, a poor sort of father who needs a partner to help him raise his children. He says to himself, "Oh, Rosemary, if only you cared." Also, he doesn't do anything about this good conduct club. He doesn't say, "You don't have to do this. I'm your dad. It's my job to help you grow up. And for Pete's sake, don't make yourselves ill to punish yourselves."
Yeah, it's one of many missed opportunities for Reverend Meredith. The next interlude involves a ghost story. As beautiful as Rainbow Valley is, it can be also a little spooky in the right light. And on one such evening, Mary Vance tells the other kids the thrilling tale of Henry Warren's ghost. She explains that the old Bailey house, which is a sort of like tumble-down, semi-abandoned place on the edges of Rainbow Valley, that was formerly home to the Baileys and their foster child, Henry Warren. Now, rumor had it that Henry was afflicted with epilepsy and would have seizures, but it was also known throughout the village that the Baileys were very hard on Henry and used to thrash him in the garden where no one would see them. Townsfolk apparently overheard Henry pleading for his life. Now, Henry Warren died as a young man, and the Baileys told everyone he died from a seizure, although rumor had it that Mr. Bailey killed Henry. But moans and cries could still be heard from the Bailey garden, and the Baileys left and never came back. Mary swears that although it was 30 years ago, Henry Warren's ghost still haunts the Bailey house and surrounding garden. The Blythe children are dubious. As they frequent the garden and have never observed anything like this ghost. Jerry also laughs it off. But Faith, Una, and Carl are taken in by Mary's tale, and when it came time for them to walk home that night, they were certain to give the old Bailey house a wide berth. A short while later, the three young Merediths were in Rainbow Valley alone, the other children otherwise occupied. Jem, in fact, was in Charlottetown writing his Queen's Entrance exam. He's the first of the Ingleside children to grow up and begin to leave Rainbow Valley behind. There the Meredith kids are, alone on an eerie night, with, quote, great velvety purple clouds heaped up in the west and spread over the valley. There was no wind, and everything was suddenly, strangely, dreadfully still. Altogether, Rainbow Valley was not a canny place just then. Then they saw a white shape off in the distance in the Bailey garden. It moved creepily, unlike any animal, although they try to convince themselves that it's just the neighbor's white calf. The three of them panic, and they run screaming out of Rainbow Valley and up the road, finding themselves unable to cross back through the valley to go home. At the gate of Ingleside, they ran into Rosemary West. Rosemary listens to them, calms them down, and soothes them, while Susan investigates the ghost, later reporting that it was a bedsheet drying on a clothesline. The Meredith children are mollified and a little embarrassed, but nevertheless are grateful for Rosemary's tenderness to them in their moment of terror. Una is sure, however, that if Rosemary were ever to be their stepmother, she would turn wicked and lose all her sweetness.
The Good Conduct Club swings into action, being undeterred by the whole fainting thing.
Oh boy.
Jerry determines that this was a disgrace and that punishment is required for their silliness involving this bedsheet ghost. And he decides that the appropriate punishment is for Carl to sit out on the tombstone alone at midnight. Jerry reasons that Carl is to blame for not protecting the girls. Carl accepts his punishment and takes up his vigil on the tombstone. And at first, this is just kind of a spooky dare, but then it starts to rain. It's only 11 p.m., so Carl isn't done yet. The rain is cold, and Carl definitely is not dressed for the weather. When the clock strikes midnight, Carl hurries home, soaked and cold to the bone. And I was about to call Mr. Meredith out for not noticing that Carl wasn't in his bed, but it turns out that he was out all night sitting vigil at a parishioner's deathbed. But still, Aunt Martha doesn't account for the kids' whereabouts. The next day, Carl is feverish, burning hot, and having visions of moving tombstones. Jerry alerts Reverend Meredith, who calls Dr. Blythe, who diagnoses pneumonia. It's a very serious case that evolves into double pneumonia. It's when there's pneumonia in both lungs. And for weeks, the Merediths, the Blythes, Miss Cornelia, and apparently much of the Glen St. Mary congregation are worried sick over Carl. Jerry explains to his father about the graveyard punishment, and we can only hope that John understood his role in his child's illness. And I think the congregation is also feeling a bit ashamed of themselves in regards to their attitude towards the Meredith, because they send tons of nourishing foods up to the manse. Well fed at last.
Finally.
Carl does recover, and the children host a party in Rainbow Valley with fireworks to celebrate his return to health.
Now, returning to our love quadrangle, Rosemary West is walking through Rainbow Valley one day when she sees Norman Douglas, of all people. Now, Rosemary tries hiding from him so that she won't be spared the awkward conversation, but not a subtle man, he calls out to her directly and explains that he was there hoping to find her. So Norman tells Rosemary that he and Ellen wish to marry, but Ellen won't due to the promise that she extracted from Rosemary all those years ago. Norman doesn't beat around the bush. Will you do it? He asks excitedly, meaning, will Rosemary take back the promise she made to Ellen? Rosemary is outwardly very calm, but I'm sure full of inner turmoil when she responds that yes, she will. Norman gladly bounds away. Rosemary returns home and tells Ellen that she will withdraw her promise, and Ellen is grateful and also a little ashamed of herself. Really pretty ashamed of herself. Ellen encourages Rosemary to reach back out to John, and Rosemary flatly refuses. Ellen tells her sister that she's always welcome in Ellen and Norman's home, and Rosemary replies that, quote, the thing is not to be thought of. Don't bring this up again. Rosemary is ice cold here.
Ellen doesn't want to leave her sister to live alone. So now Ellen feels like she can't marry Norman and leave Rosemary. And Rosemary won't go back to John because she's sure he has moved on and doesn't care anymore. So this is a fine mess that Ellen has made.
It's ridiculous.
Leave it up to Mary Vance to again be the conveyor of gossip to the Merediths. She tells them that the rumor is that Rosemary West won't marry their father because the kids are too wild. And Una is glad about this. And when Mary Vance goes on and on about how it's too bad because Rosemary would probably have been so good for their father, Una calls her out on how she's always talked about stepmothers being cruel. Mary kind of walks it back a little bit, admitting that maybe stepmothers are just a little cranky. But she's also here to talk about the newest scandal, which is Carl somehow throwing a live eel into Mrs. Carr's buggy while she was driving past, causing her to jump out of the moving buggy.
This is bad.
This is bad, and it's bad enough that even Mr. Meredith has heard about it and is angry and distressed. He even remembers it long enough to talk to Carl about it. Carl admits that he did it. Mrs. Carr had called them all varmints, and the other boys dared Carl to put a dead eel in her buggy. He was sure it was dead, and he threw it in. But then it wasn't, so it came to life, squirmed out between the seats, and Mrs. Carr screamed and jumped out, as one might.
Oh yeah, if there's a live eel in my car all of a sudden, heck no.
Mr. Meredith feels like he actually has to punish Carl for the first time ever. This is the thing he did on purpose. It wasn't just a mistake. The punishment he can think of is that he actually has to whip him. Carl is trying to be brave about it and actually feels awful that his father feels so bad. He tells the other kids, "I'm not going to cry no matter how much it hurts. It would make father feel so bad if I did. He's all cut up now. I wish I could whip myself hard enough and save him doing it."
Ugh.
But when it comes down to it, Mr. Meredith can't whip Carl. He just sees his dead wife in Carl's eyes and remembers that he almost died just 6 weeks ago. He sends Carl away and he breaks down in his study. Una slips in to comfort her father and sees him talking to himself. Exactly what he says, we don't know, but Una decides that she needs to make her father happy, even though it might come between them. After spending some time crying into her mother's wedding dress and promising not to forget her, Una takes herself over to the West and asks Rosemary to marry her father. Una sobs to her that they will promise not to be bad kids so Rosemary can marry him. And Rosemary tries to clarify that it was never about that. Una pleads with her and says that she knows her father loves Rosemary because of what she heard him say in the study. She whispers whatever it was to Rosemary, and it makes Rosemary realize that John does care intensely about her. Una begs Rosemary not to turn her father against them. And she realizes how brave Una was to come to Rosemary because she thought it would make her father happy, even at her own expense. After much reassurance from Rosemary that she hopes to have a wonderful, friendly relationship with the kids, Una is so relieved and happy, and she runs home with a letter for her father from Rosemary. And then Rosemary marches in and tells Ellen that she is going to marry John if he still wants to.
Woo!
And the book ends with a double wedding being planned. Rosemary and John, Ellen and Norman. Miss Cornelia even notes that just the very fact of the engagement has brought Mr. Meredith down to earth a bit, and he's actually making more thoughtful decisions about the kids. For instance, not planning to let them stay with Aunt Martha while he's on his honeymoon. Instead, the kids will stay with various neighbors. And the ladies' aid is planning to clean the manse thoroughly from top to bottom while they're gone. And Norman Douglas will fill the cellar with food with them. And we end with the kids all having a celebration in Rainbow Valley for Jem, who will be leaving for Queens the next day and leaving childhood. We finish the book with Walter having another one of his little premonitions of the piper, saying that he, Jem, Carl, and Jerry will be piped round and round the world by the wild music. The girls shiver with this, but Jem jumps up. Quote, "He stood up on a little hillock, tall and splendid, with his open brow and his fearless eyes. There were thousands like him all over the land of the maple. 'Let the piper come and welcome,' he cried, waving his hand. 'I'll follow him gladly round and round the world.'"
Oh, foreshadowing indeed. So that's Rainbow Valley, everyone.
Oh my gosh, what a fun book.
As we often do in these longer recap episodes, we will be skipping our Birch Path and Puff Sleeve segments today. I don't think we left too much out of our, of our recap, but I know that we will have a chance to get to everything in our upcoming episodes. We can't skip a chance to recommend something inspired by Anne, though. Now, the poor Meredith kids, being raised on such drab sustenance as porridge and boiled muttons, makes us want to take them home and feed them. So let's recommend some of our favorite hearty recipes that we would have loved to make for them.
So this one is from my favorite cooking site, Smitten Kitchen. Honestly, never misses for me. So that's a great resource overall. And I am going to recommend her recipe for pizza beans. This is the perfect chilly weather hearty recipe. It's got lots of chopped veggies cooked with crushed tomatoes and white beans and then topped with melted cheese. And it is so filling and cozy. It's great scooped up on crusty bed and it reheats for leftovers really well. I make it with canned white beans because I usually don't have like the fancy dried beans she puts in her recipe. And it works great. And I also usually add a little Italian sausage too when I'm sauteing the veggies for the flavor. And now that I'm talking about it to you, Kelly, I am honestly sorry I didn't put this on this week's menu.
That sounds delicious. And I think there's some similarities with the recipe that I'm going to share too.
Oh, excellent. Good.
Which honestly barely counts as a recipe, but it's one of my favorite, like easy, hearty meals, especially on a night when you don't mind turning on the oven. So this recipe was developed by Allie Slagle, who is one of the recipe developers for the New York Times, and she calls it crispy gnocchi with burst tomatoes. But what it is essentially just this. It's a package of store-bought dried gnocchi, a carton of cherry tomatoes, and some torn up bits of mozzarella. It couldn't be more simple. So what you'll do is you'll just kind of combine the tomatoes and gnocchi in an oven-safe pan, like a cast iron skillet, drizzle all that with olive oil and whatever spices you prefer. For me, I'll usually do salt, pepper, garlic, crushed red pepper, oregano, and something like sumac or like a citrus blend. I like a little bit of a citrus zing to this recipe. And then give that all a few minutes on the stove top, just enough time to get a little hint of a crust on the gnocchi. Once you've got that going, turn off the heat on the stove, sprinkle up some torn fresh mozzarella on top, and put it under the broiler for a few minutes until it's bubbling. You can also add some nice torn up basil at the end. What happens between the skillet and the broiler is that all those little cherry tomatoes just burst open. And so you have this wonderfully flavorsome sauce. You've got a lot of contrasting textures because the gnocchi get kind of puffed up and soft and chewy on the inside, but also a little crusty on the outside. And you just get all those kind of wonderful Italian inspired flavors mingling together. And then you can adapt it any way you like. It's really delicious, very hearty. And the Meredith kids deserved good, wholesome food like this.
Absolutely. I don't think Aunt Martha ever met a spice.
No, I'm sure she did not. Well, thank you for joining us today, Kindred Spirits. And now that we've introduced you to Rainbow Valley, we cannot wait to explore all of these fantastic themes with you. Next episode, we have a wonderful guest with us, Miriam Khorasani. Miriam's going to help us discuss how Rainbow Valley is not just a physical place, but an emotional and spiritual place as well. To make sure you'll never miss an episode, please subscribe to Kindred Spirits Book Club wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can still get a free Kindred Spirits Book Club sticker by leaving us a review or sharing about us on social media. Just email us or DM us on Instagram to tell us that you did. Thank you so much, Kindred Spirits.
Thanks, Kindred Spirits.